The other thing to bear in mind when it comes to isolation, and this is actually something that that was what my first video was about, isolation. And in that video I explained how being entangled with the kind of people that I am dealing with, you can end up isolating yourself in various forms. Even if you were to have a career, have a job, and like I did for a long time, have obviously children, doing all of those things that is demanded of you, you can still feel isolated. You can still isolate yourself. Sometimes you can even isolate yourself without even realizing that you're isolating yourself. You can be pushed into a decision of isolating yourself, not because you want to be isolating yourself, but because of the circumstances you are in. And with Lara, for instance, despite being out there in the world and reaching out to people and attending church every Sunday and doing all of those kind of things and going to the gym, meeting people and, going morning coffees and with all those ladies and the clubs and all of those things, she still managed to feel isolated and not being able to talk to people about her issues besides talking to me. For example, she hasn't been able to entertain people that she knows that are from the same country as her, because every time she tried, a long time ago, she doesn't even bother anymore, but a long time ago, every time she tried, her husband did everything he could not to make those people feel welcome. Do you see what I'm saying? Me, I chose to isolate myself, but here is a very, very smart, outgoing, extrovert person like Lara doing all the things that she was supposed to do, and she still managed to feel completely isolated, and she still managed to go through such a huge problem on her own with no help and no way of actually even understanding what was really happening. Even to this day, I know more about what's happening to us than she does, and she started that journey a long time ago because she was always on top of her husband and asking questions and demanding answers and accountabilities. So she's been on her husband almost from the beginning of their relationship, and they've been married like 27 years or something like that, and they've been together for almost 30. Whereas me, despite, all of those things, in 1 year I have done more to understand as much as I've understood compared to her, and by the way, she doesn't want to know. She just doesn't want to know. She's very, very different from me. She prefers to to pray every day and give it to the Lord, and I have to respect her for that. So I encourage her, I continue to encourage her. I choose the bits and pieces of information that I give her to help her, but without actually forcing her and really forcing her to deal with more than she wants to deal with, because she's just not quite ready to understand fully that she's dealing with a psychopath too. She doesn't want to learn that truth. It's just the way it is. And by the way, her husband is a VP of some big company here in town, and is a very well respected member of their church, and he gives huge sums of money to that church too. And because of all those reasons, I am now convinced that temperaments, level of intelligence matters very, very little when you are entangled with somebody who has a disordered mind, who is a pathological being, who is a narcopath, who is a psychopath, who is all of those things, high on the spectrum of narcissism. It doesn't matter who you are, they are going to find a way to meet you where you are. They are intelligent beings. Those who are less capable, they end up slapping you around, scaring you and bullying you physically within a week or 2 months after you meet, or the minute you actually say I do, and then the next day they're somebody completely different. Those are very different types of entity who are not able to control themselves as much as those high functioning, long-term, slow, those kind of people like my wolves. Those are on a completely different levels. They really control themselves. They control everything, and they are in charge, and they cook you slowly. By the time you realize what's up, usually you have completely lost everything and you are so weak. It's very, very hard to organize yourself, to have the strength to get out of there. The reason why I take the time to describe the differences between Lara and I is because I want to show why I am now convinced that although Lara and I have very different personalities, different backgrounds, different levels of intelligence, different temperaments, different levels of education, and that we used very different approaches when dealing with our spouses, we still ended up with the exact same devastating results. And the reason for that is simply because both Lara and I have been co-parenting with entities whose only goals were to ride us, then punish us, then take everything away from us to inflict as much pain and damage as possible. Finding ways to prevent us from being able to claim any kind of achievement is part and parcel of the abuse. So they gradually, insidiously started to corrupt the minds of our children and the values we tried very hard to instill in our children. And all this was done in such a way that it would fool even the smartest person out there to think that our husbands did nothing more than to show love to their own children, even if it was in a misguided way. It's just like our abuse. It's very difficult to explain it to people. When the abuse is not flagrant, when the abuse is not physical, most people rationalize it. They find all sorts of ways to explain most of what those people are doing to us. And it's the same with our children, with the abuse going on with our children. You have to understand that our husbands never shouted at our kids or scared our kids or hit our kids. All they did was seduce and cajole. And then our husbands proceeded to give our children something to unite against, which turned out to be us, the children's mothers. This tactic helped create and reinforce an artificial bond between them and the children. And again, this is the type of covert abuse within family unit no one seemed to talk about. I suspect this is because a lot of normal parents out there
use bribe and manipulation to get their children's love and loyalty. And yet, this is not a condemnation of any kind on my part. I am just trying to make the difference here that what I'm talking about here is much, much more sinister and should not even be compared with a normal scenario. Because the differences between children growing up with misguided, even if they're misguided, parents and have done this kind of thing for one reason or another, those kids grow up to be fine. But the consequences on our children's lives are not only devastating, but they are going to be very long lasting. It will take our children having children of their own to recognize how unhealthy and misguiding their fathers were. And even then, I bet they might think fondly about their fathers giving them alcohol, cigarettes, loads of cash, and letting them do whatever they wanted to do, as well as flunking school, not attending school, with real fondness forever. From the little research I have made so far, a lot point to the fact that most often than not, at least one child ends up taking on the traits of the narc for life. So even once they grow up, there is no guarantee that they will come to their senses about their own abuse and accept the truth that their father's constant triangulations were very abusive and made us, their mother, suffer. And that is a truth to consider and not dismiss.
Poor Lara, her physical condition, it's getting really bad. But from the moment I met her, she was already suffering from high blood pressure, anxiety, panic attacks. She has now developed blood clots. She has an array of physical ailments that are just not getting better as time goes on. And here she is now engaged in a day-to-day battle with her daughter. Whereas me, I'm just like, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. But do as you wish, because I just don't have that strength. And I am not mocking Lara, I admire her for her strength, because I know I don't have that strength. I know I don't have it within me to fight like this. I really been in a hot seat for about a year now, whereas Lara, she's been on this hot seat for well over 20 years, and that means getting aggravated and responding and attacking and defending and screaming and demanding answers and engaging in that fight, whereas this has not been my case. And I don't think, even if I knew, if I had known, I would have gone a long time ago. I just don't have that temperament, and I just don't have the ability to do this. It will literally kill me. I don't have it within me. This might help her maybe in the long run with her daughter, but like I said, I just don't have it within me to engage my children, let alone my daughter, on that level. I can't. But before I put a close to this narcissistic, scary living series, because this is the last one, I would like to share with you a couple of stories of Lara that she actually shared with me. And yes, Lara actually knows that I actually have stories here on YouTube. I told her about it, but she never asked me to send her a link, or she never asked details. And also I'm not using a real name, and since you only see me from here these days, her story is safe. I mean to say, you'll never know who she is. And she'll never know who you are either. So it's safe for me to share that with you. And I want to share that with you to show you just how scary it really can be living with those people, and to show you the similarities of between her story and my story, and to show also the lack of normal emotion our partners have towards us and towards our, their own children. And you'll be surprised also to find just how deep those partners that we have chosen, or we thought we had chosen, because now I know that we didn't choose them, they chose us, just how deep their hatred for us is. And it becomes very sad to see, to learn, to understand, and to accept the fact that those people, they made love to us, they impregnated us, they paid our bills, they keep a roof over our heads, they go to church, they go to work, they appear completely normal. And yet it's really, really far from the truth. Everything is a front. A long time ago, Lara shared with me an incident that happened when her husband and her went to a beach, and she decided to leave her husband with the children to go for a walk. The boys were playing safely on the edge of the water, and the little girl was building a sand castle. Her husband was reading a newspaper under the shade. As she climbed a little hill overlooking the water, she heard kids screaming. And when she looked, she saw her 3 kids struggling in the sea, and they were nowhere near the edge, where she left them. They were far into the water. She yelled at her husband and ran down the hill, screaming and shouting for help. She was just beside herself. Even when she was telling me that story, she was crying because the whole thing was just so hard for her. She couldn't hold her tears when she was telling me that. And this is a story that she told me when I told her what my husband did to me and my daughter when she was at the hospital, the whole trip, carrying her and going to the hospital and all of those things. That's when she opened up to me and told me that story. Before she reached the water herself, people had gathered, people that were there, they had gathered. Some people, jumped into the sea to try to rescue the kids. Long story short, the kids got saved by a passing boat who fished them out of the water, the 3 of them. Lara told me that after she berated her husband for not keeping a closer eye on the children, he infuriated her by asking her to stop acting hysterical since nobody had died. He literally asked her, "What's your problem? Everybody's fine, nobody got hurt. What's your problem?" And one thing that happens a lot in our kind of abuse, because You can't always be on top of everything. Not all the you don't make sense of all the details of what's being done to you right there and then. It usually takes a while, at least for me. And she's much smart. She's a much smarter lady than I am, and even her, it happened to her. So she realized much later that when all of that happened, all of that commotion and chaos, with everybody milling around and, trying to make sure that, they were fine and the kids were fine and everything. She realized many years later that not only her husband never showed any emotional reaction, but he actually never even left his chair or even dropped the newspaper he was reading. When everybody else was literally besides themselves, worried about those 3 babies almost losing their lives at sea. And I'm now even thinking that he was probably so relaxed and probably so far out of the picture that possibly an awful lot of people may not even have realized he was the father. They probably even thought, they may even have judged her to be very irresponsible mother. They may even have thought that she went off and left her kids without supervision. That's me now thinking about that. This will not surprise me. I think next time I'm going to talk to her. I'm going to tell her that and see what she has to say. This will not surprise me. And this is the kind of people that we are dealing with. Most recently, she shared with me a very mind-blowing story that started with a daughter out of the blue, completely out of the blue, starting calling her a whore. And she was just so taken aback. She didn't even have time to get upset. She started asking her daughter, what's wrong? Why on earth would you even think of calling me like this? What's gotten into you? And her daughter basically told her that her father had shown her his diary of almost 30 years ago when he was romancing her, Lara. And obviously that made absolutely no sense to Lara, but the daughter insisted that she read the diary, it was written there, and there is even the date and all of those things. Her father could not have made that up. She was a whore. And somehow Lara managed to got hold of that diary, and she told me she almost had a heart attack. She could not make sense of what she read, because inside the diary, her husband accused her of basically having another relationship, being a whore, and he wrote in the diary that she even had an abortion while she was trying to act all pure and everything. And Lara said that it just made absolutely no sense, because her husband was the first, and she had absolutely no other guys. She's very religious, and also at the time she was full on into her own studies. She was studying to become a bioengineer of some sort. I can't even remember the title. So that was taking an awful lot of her time. And her husband, now a husband, but back then he was pursuing her relentlessly and traveling from here in America to go and see her almost every month to try to seduce her, romance her, and get her to fall in love with him. And he was relentless. He was the one pursuing her and he knew exactly who she was. And you know, they didn't meet in a bar or anything like that. They met because she was under the tutelage of some people, because she was a young student, and she was under, she had a grant, and those people were looking after her, and those people knew people who invited that man who ended up, that American guy that ended up pursuing her, you know, like crazy, and eventually she fell for him. So how on earth could he have been writing those things about her in his diary? And to make matter even more, you know, strange, is that diary, from what Lara said, looked really real, because she couldn't even dispute the authenticity of the diary, because all the dates prior that page and after that page, where he basically calls her a whore and all sorts of stuff, contain descriptions of some of the things that they did and the places where they went. So basically the diary looked really, really real. And this is where it gets really, really shocking, because why would he have written something so false, so outlandish about her at the time he was acting madly in love with her and pursuing her relentlessly? And then, almost 30 years later, to show it to his daughter as a proof that her mother is not who she is making herself to be. I mean, do you understand the complication of all of this? This proves just how disordered their mind is. And also this proves, from the moment those people target you and they pursue you and they convince you of their love and that you fall in love with them, they already have one foot out of the door. They're already preparing their exit. They are already 10, 20, 100 steps ahead of the victims. And that's why most of us, once we realize what is happening, all we can do is play catch up. And most of the time we get nowhere near winning or regaining that advantage over them. So whether they are covert abusers, whether they are overt abusers, whether they are high functioning, malevolent, malicious, malign, manipulators, emotional extortionists, narcissists, sociopaths, or narcopaths, whatever the right word is to describe them, most of them, if not all of them, they don't love, they don't care, they don't attach. Our existence is merely an act of God to serve them and to sustain them as far as they are concerned. And that's all.